we're doing good. And all right, welcome everybody. We are back to back today. So if you're on the challenge, thank you for being here. I'm Asia,
I'm Molly.
and we're the founders of this group. And today we're super excited to be chatting with Camille Proctor, founder of and executive director of Colors of
Color of Autism Foundation.
Yeah, I wrote it down
Awesome.
and went out of my head.
Amazing. So Camille runs this incredible organization that I was so excited to learn about, and they serve as the connecting thread to information, services, and other families affected by autism, and really just such incredible work and emphasis on the other families. I think that's so important, and it's something that's often overlooked, is that importance of community. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your work?
Absolutely. So the goal and the mission of the Color of Autism is to build efficacy within families of color. We found that the underserved community is not getting the same sort of support that their white counterparts are. And there's a disparity when we talk about diagnosis and we talk about getting the services, and just a bevy of things that the underserved community is grossly lacking. So what we do at the Color of Autism, we not only support these families, but we educate them and we connect them to other families in their community who are like them.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so important. And for those of you who don't have the context of autism, one of the most important pieces of autism is an early diagnosis and access to services at a young age. And so, you can only imagine when you're living in a community that doesn't have access to services, that doesn't have access to awareness, that years go by sometimes before families access services. And do you deal with that? Do you meet families who their kids are 6 or 7 or yeah?
Absolutely. We meet families all the time who say, my son got diagnosed when he went to school, and I have to explain to them, the school is not the place where you get a diagnosis. Mm-hmm. So we have school-age children. I've met people who didn't get their children diagnosed until they were 12. Because there's so many misnomers about autism. Oftentimes people think that if their child is reading early, like I know a young man that started reading at 3. Well, that's nice that he could read a book cover to cover, but he's on the autism spectrum and he needs support. So we are very steadfast on, if you see something that may seem peculiar to you, don't keep thinking a child will grow out of it. You want to identify what it is, and that it could be autism, and autism is nothing to be feared. Yeah. It's not. It's something, when you find out what it is, you need to embrace it, because that is who your child is. They're part of the autistic community. So you have to figure out how to be an advocate for your child, but you also have to make sure your child gets the right, what I call reinforcements of love, meaning you have to make sure that you always instill in that child that they're like the most important person in the world, that you love them so much, because if they don't feel love, yes, they will have that isolation that you hear about all the time. If you don't encourage them and say, hey, I believe you can do, then they won't try and do. So these are the things that we try to instill in our families, because it's really important, I think. And for a lot of autistic adults, when I talk to them, it's like a 50-50 split. They had supportive families and a lot didn't.
Yeah.
And I don't want anyone to feel ever that they're unloved. I think that that's the biggest key. But as a person who has a child on the spectrum, it took me a while not to love my son, but not to get out of that mode of I'm trying to fix stuff. It was like I thought I was a mechanic. And so I was throwing all these things at him, and he wasn't catching them because they were things that I wanted. Like I couldn't take the me out of his life. So, and it was very frustrating to me. And I hear parents all the time, they say, oh, it's so tough, it's so hard, we need help, we need help. the first help that any parent needs for themselves is to let it go. And when I say let it go, they have to think in terms of, how is this affecting the person that I'm helping, right?
Yes.
If a child is frustrated, let's say, and oftentimes people will say, well, a child doesn't want to do ABA, or a child doesn't want to do speech. But if you see that frustration, then you need to fall back a little bit, a little bit. I'm not saying don't put your child in therapy, but what I'm saying is that children are very wise
Yes.
beyond their years. And oftentimes they will, because of the lack for some to be able to communicate, you have to read between the lines. But again, it goes back to that parent of being a strong advocate, but also accepting who your child is. And if you accept the fact that they process differently, and sometimes things don't connect the way that they should, then you'll learn to talk yourself off that cliff and become a stronger advocate for both of you.
Oh, so good.
I really like that, because like it's like what you're talking about in terms of parenting a child with autism is a lot very similar along the lines of what we talk about when it comes to engaging in these conversations around race, right? Because like, what do? You have to listen, right? Listen for what's not being said.
Right.
Right? You have to let go of how you think things should go, or supposed to go, or how someone should be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like everything, it's just like, and then as a parent, what have you learned when it comes to, being able to read between the lines? Like, what have you seen for your son, and what have you seen for yourself?
Well, my son, well, first of all, he can be, I mean, he's just like any other kid, you know what I mean? I call him shady sometimes because he is kind of shady, but all teenagers are. I mean, in a sense that, it's really hard to say, but it was funny. He knows how to do more than even I knew he could do. So that was like, I think the first wake up call that I had is like, you weren't giving him enough credit, and I wasn't giving him enough credit. So one of the things that we noticed early on about him is that he's a language savant. So while he doesn't speak, and even now he doesn't speak clear, what I like to call clear English, he's really fluent in Spanish and other languages. We don't know where they came from. And I always have this running gag is that my son would have a career as the fourth member of the Migos, a mumble rapper, because that's what he sounds like some days when he's talking. It's like, wait, what? And I'm like, and then I thought about it. I was like, I could put a beat behind that and just get some money.
Be a TikTok star.
Money. So, I mean, and it's okay to laugh at your kids. I mean, because they're funny, they're just, kids are funny. And for me, what's helped both of us is for me to treat him like I treat, well, he has an adult sister, but I don't really differentiate. I mean, I want him to grow up with the same full-on experience that the other one got, so, if she got heckled, and he's okay with it because he thinks it's funny too. And he has a great sense of humor. And he's like, like one day he has a schoolmate and she likes to send us text messages, and she'll send us text messages, good night, have a good night, how are you? And one day she sent me this text message and she's like, what's Ari doing? And I wasn't really thinking about what I said, but my reply was, he's over here being raggedy. And she said, raggedy? What's raggedy? And so I texted her a picture of Raggedy Ann and Andy. And I said, you see these two? You see these two? And she's like, yeah. I said, he's the one on the left. She goes, Raggedy. And so she took that back to class and she was like, yeah, Ari's raggedy. He's raggedy. It's okay.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay to have a little fun with your kids. But then also too, when we talk in terms of the way that he processes, I mean, there's a lot of things that I worry about too. As much as I laugh and I have a great time with him, then there's sometimes it's frustrating for me that he doesn't get certain things because, I mean, he processed the way he processes, right? But when I talk to him about, going out into the world, for example, I started the organization primarily not just because there was a disparity of services and information. I realized that when I got his diagnosis, he was 2, and I looked for support groups, and I couldn't find any that had any diversity in it. When I got to the support group, I was a diversity. And I couldn't really have those freeing conversations with the people I would be in the support groups with, like, talking about how you talk to your family about your child being autistic. Uh, just how do you talk to people who want to hurl insults at you when your child has a meltdown? Now, I'm pretty quick-witted, and I've gone through that, and I'll tell you a story about a little old lady who said to me that he needed a whooping when he was having a meltdown. And I just kindly told her, I said, lady, I don't hit old people, but I'll slap an old back. When you say you would whoop my child, you upgraded the old back. But it was at that time that I realized that I needed to do something positive. Otherwise, I was going to be in jail for slapping old people or something. That, as well as being in these support groups and listening to people say to me, when I would say, what's going to happen when he's, 13 and he's 6 feet tall, and if he's still unable to communicate, if he gets approached by the police and doesn't understand how to yield, he's going to get killed. Now, shortly after making these statements, Trayvon Martin was killed, and then another and another. Now, the people that I'm naming, they weren't on the autism spectrum, but they were African American. And so I realized that when the people would tell me, oh, no, nothing would happen, that they were clueless. But then at the end, they asked me kindly out of their groups because I was too much of a Debbie Downer. So I started my own. And so now when I talk to him and have these conversations with him, he doesn't get it all the time. Like he says he does, but he doesn't get it, And so we walk about 3, well, we're getting back to it because we live in the Midwest. So it's kind of, for some reason, it snowed 2 days ago after being 70.
Yeah.
But we do these 3-mile walks, and it's my little way of making sure my neighborhood knows who he is.
Yeah.
Because I live in the suburbs. So I want to make sure that people know who he is, because when I talk to him about it, he says he gets it. Like, no hand, like I'll have him repeat. It's like an oath that we take. No hands in pockets. Look at police, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I feel terrible that this is something I have to do. But the reality is, I have a newly turned 15-year-old as of April 1st, and he's 6'1".
Yeah.
He's a tall, lanky looking, gangly kid. And, I've done workshops with the police where I've used him. And, we do this exercise where I'll have him walk, and I'll ask the policeman, call him. And the policeman will say, stop, and he'll keep walking. And then the policeman will run in front of him, and the policeman will say, what's your name? And then my son will go, what's your name? And then the cop would say, no, what's your name? My son's like, no, what's your name? And I asked him, like the cop, are you frustrated yet? He said, yeah. I said, what would happen if you met someone on the street that did this to you? He goes, I would want to arrest him.
Yeah.
And so realizing that, I learned 2 things in us doing those police trainings, that police need more than training, right? See, in my opinion, they just need to stop killing Black people, but that's another whole different training.
Yeah.
But what we can do in the interim is that we can have a support group, which is what we're doing now. We have a support group where we have law enforcement involved in the support group. And it's for teens and young adults. It's a situation where we want them to forge friendships, like genuine friendships. Like we want the cop to learn about Daniel, the kid on the spectrum. We want Daniel to learn about the cop, not as the cop, but as the guy who has 2 kids, a wife, a Labrador, or whatever the case may be. We want them to get to understand and know each other. So that way, that kid Daniel may respond better if something were to happen to him. But most importantly, that cop won't shoot off his gun when someone acts erratically. Because my son, when he walks, he has this thing for maps and license plates. So he likes to look at cars license plates. So if he'll like do this. And so if with him being in the group, now it's kind of understood that license plates are his thing. They're not casing, you know what I mean? He's not casing the car. Yeah. But then on the other hand, you do have people that case cars like that. But my point is that we want to lessen the fatalities, but we also want to build relationships, better relationships between law enforcement and the autism community, because at the end of the day, both have families to go home to. Yeah. You know, so that's really important.
Yeah, and I really love that, because like what you're doing is exactly what like we were talking about. It's like shifting the context, right? Of like how police officers see and view these kids, right? And view Black people, and vice versa. But like they're the ones with the guns, right? And like the state authority to do whatever they want,
right?
But like I feel it's like I keep saying, like we were talking, like having these conversations, it's a lot. I think it becomes a lot harder to just shoot somebody when you know, like, oh yeah, that's Daniel from down the street, and his mom like walks in the grocery store, and like, oh yeah, like sometimes we hang out together, we go to lunch together, and you know, like it becomes a lot harder, you know. And I like that's just like, it just speaks to like I think the importance of like getting out there and like having these conversations and like being willing to communicate, because nothing's gonna happen if we're just like, oh, you're over there, this is how you're gonna be over there, and we're over here and we can't do nothing, you know. But we're just like angry and mad all the time. Not that that's not valid, but like nothing shifts.
The paradigm never shifts. And unfortunately, that leads me into a segue where I'm going to do a harmless plug or shameless plug, whichever one you want to call it. Right now, we have a situation, and you can find it on our Facebook page and our Instagram, which is The Color of Autism. We have a young man named Armani Sharp, and he was walking through well, we call it the suburbs, but if you visited the city, sorry for those who may live in Hazel Park, it doesn't look like a suburb, but we'll call it the suburbs. And he was walking on his daily therapeutic walk, which was recommended, not sort of, which was recommended by his therapist. And so he got approached by two older white women who said, "Hey, what are you doing in this neighborhood? Or why are you here?" Now, something happened, but their version of the something that happened was that he exposed himself to them. Now, Armani's on the spectrum. He has anxiety, he has a host of things. And if you talk to him, he's probably one of the most mousiest kids you ever want to talk to. Like he's a handsome kid, but it's like, give me some words. Not because he's nonverbal, because he is not trying to talk to you, you know? So because he was approached in an area where on one side it was one city and on the other side it was another, he's now facing charges in two different municipalities. And, you know, there's been some talk of pleading him out, but then he would have to be on a sex offender list. But why?
That's a sex offender, yeah.
Because he didn't do anything. He definitely, I'm in the firm belief that he didn't expose himself to them. I believe that in my heart. And so now we're faced with the task of trying to help Armani's family, or trying to help Armani, most importantly, because he is an adult. He's a young adult. I believe he's 19. So he's a young adult, and he has to fight the court system. And we don't want him to fight the system alone. So if you go on our Facebook page or our Instagram, you'll see the details to what I'm talking about. And I urge you to please call the numbers on our call to action, because we really want to help this young man. But then also moving past this whole criminal case or misdemeanor, I don't even know what they're trying to do, but moving past all of this, we want to make sure that he gets the support he needs. Which kind of brings me into another thing we do at the Color of Autism. We do training for families. We do parent training, and we do we're developing some individual programs for young adults on the spectrum. And we want to help them be able to go out into the world and actually find a real vocation. And so oftentimes I'll get big companies, like the computer companies, I'm not gonna say any names, but just people in general that will come to us and say, hey, we're having this job fair for diverse individuals, neurodiverse individuals. And I'm like, oh, that's great. But did you know that underserved neurodiverse individuals, they don't have any inroads to those jobs? And then it's like cricket silence, cricket silence. And it's like, well, why? Whatever do you mean? Well, the thing is that they don't have those they don't have programs like what I like to call starter programs. There aren't any starter programs in underserved communities.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and most times, in most cases, in the school districts that are underserved, just in general, they have a hard time getting typical kids to college, right? So getting someone on the spectrum might be a little bit harder, not because of their intellect, just because it is what it is, right?
Right.
So, you know, we're now building programs where we can teach them the basic stuff, like what you need to know, how to go on a job interview, introduction to coding, introduction to culinary skills, an introduction to everything. But at least we want to be able to say we gave them the basics that they were able to go on and get those jobs. Because when people say to me, and I remember when my son was little and a lady said, my son's doing great, he has autism. And I go, what does he do? She goes, he's a greeter at Walmart. I firmly looked that lady in the face and I said, I did not want that for my son. And I know she she didn't understand.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's not, but then again, that was a me thing too. So maybe he does want to be a Walmart greeter, but I know I didn't want him to be one, mainly because I didn't want to take care of him for the rest of my life. You know, no, I'm just joking. I'm fine with it is what it is, but we do have a running gag with each other that if he, you know, how sometimes boys can be, and it's like, dude, listen, you got to clean all that up because girls don't like that. Otherwise, you're gonna be living in my basement. You're gonna be living in my basement for the rest of your life, and I want you out. And he's like, because he really likes girls, you know. He's like,
Teenager, yeah.
he'll get him a nice haircut. Like his thing is these haircuts where his barber Rico puts all these different designs in his hair, and he, you know, and he's like, and you're like, well, why is he? I'm like, please say something to him. And then they go, oh, you look so nice. And he goes, nice. I said, and say nice haircut, please. So we can move on with our lives. So we can just move on with our lives.
That's amazing.
I love it.
I mean, he's so much fun. And it's like, I just had to learn how to, again, sometimes parents, we need to learn how to embrace our kids. And I'm telling you, when I learned that, my life got a lot easier because I was literally making myself sick. I was sick. You know, my blood pressure was like I just made myself really ill. And I was convinced that it was autism was just making me ill. It's just messed up my whole life. And that's not the case because you know what? That's how he was born. That's who he is, right? Yeah. The other thing is that if he had cancer, it would be no different. Let me get a better comparable as this. If he was blind, if he was deaf,
right,
he would still be Ari. He's autistic, so he's still Ari. So that is what it is. And you know, through the programs that we have at the Color of Autism, and by the way, all of our programming is free, which is why we're out so heavily asking, we take donations, we get grants, is because we want to keep our services for free. Because too often, the services that are non-professional services, let me preface that, non-professional services such as ours, because we're not therapists, right? So therapists, they charge a fee, but and I know that you've noticed that there's been this uptick of people charging who aren't even therapists, who are barely LSWs charging people for autism support.
Yep.
And I think it's a bit egregious because if you're not an actual therapist, doctor, PhD, something or other in this field, you shouldn't be. I mean, I'm not going to make myself, oh, I'm the parent coach. Well, what did you do? I had a child with autism, and I'm going to teach you how to be a better parent with a child with, no. But give me $200 anyway.
So do you all, for the trainings for police departments, how do you do those? Do you do them in your community? Do you do them around the country? How do you?
So what we do with the one-to-one training, because we totally revamped it, and now it's just a support group. So it's the one-to-one support group, and since everything's virtual, anyone can join from anywhere. And that is on our website as well. And you can just click the banner and sign up for it. And then we'll get back to you. And we have a clinical social worker who runs the group, and he'll get back with you.
Yeah, that's great. What have you, so when did you found the organization?
In 2009.
Okay, amazing. Congratulations.
Shortly after my son was going on 3 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, so first of all, those of you who don't run nonprofit organizations and you're not in that space, surviving over 10 years is a huge accomplishment.
Big deal.
It's amazing. It's really impressive. And it speaks to, I think, the needs that you're meeting, right? And when you and I spoke on the phone, we talked about, people trying to help, right? And helping, like, oh, we need to go and help these underserved communities of kids with autism. And you said something that really stuck with me. It was like, and it's the same thing that I hear working internationally around the world. It's like, we don't need people to come in here deciding that they know what's best.
Right.
And I think that is really, do you want to just talk more about that and why that is part of what you're up to?
Sure. I think that too often we have large organizations who I like to call, they monopolize the spaces. Everyone's spaces. And then they come into underserved communities and they're like, hey, we're here to save you. Let us tell you what you need. Well, what's important about the Color of Autism is that we're running culturally competent support, right?
Yeah.
We want to get to the crux of why aren't you following through with these appointments? Why haven't you gotten evaluation? What's obstructing you from getting to the finish line? What is the problem? In our parent trainings, we're able to put people of color in front of them, even though it's in front of a Zoom screen, because everything we've done for the past forever, it seems like forever.
I know.
It does look forever.
This lifetime, exactly.
We're putting a Black speech and language pathologist in front of them. We're putting an Afro-Cuban psychologists in front of them. We're putting just people of every diasporas in front of them so they can see someone that looks like them. So our facilitations are led by what I like to call the experts. You people who do have the degrees and who do have the licensing. We have you come into our classrooms and you run the class and you're able to talk to a parent about what the therapeutic process is, right? Get a parent to better understand that if your child started speech on Monday and today is Thursday, trust and believe they will not be spitting 16 bars like Run DMC on Thursday. It's not possible.
Yeah.
And this is how I talk. And that's another thing. We just keep it real because, some people say, well, that's really harsh. It's like for too long, people have come in and there was a show on television called Living Single. And there was a character named Sinclair. And every time something happened, she would go, woo, 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 woo. For too long, people have come into these communities of color, woo, 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 woo. And treated us as if we were like...
Taking me back.
Treating us as if we were just these docile little idiots. And that's not who we are. We're not that. We're not that. And sometimes dealing with the stigma of things that associates or attaches itself to autism ain't so pretty. Not being able to get services, that ain't so pretty, right? You have a self-injurious child at home. You want to make sure they're protected, but you can't get services. So there's holes in your wall. But most importantly, your child has scars because he's a skin picker or whatever his case may be. And that's not pretty. That's not pretty. You know what I mean? Not being able to support your loved one and the things they want to do. Like you have a child who's very, very bright, and they would just, all they want to do is they want to go to this particular program where they can learn how to code. But the program is for, it doesn't have a neurodiverse component in it, meaning it's not inclusive of them.
Yeah.
So they can't go because, you know, there's no one there to really be patient with them.
Yeah.
You know, and it's also not pretty when you're really the smartest person in the classroom, right? And you get all your schoolwork done, but you don't have any friends.
Right.
That's not pretty either.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that individuals on the spectrum have to go through. And I just like for people to remember that, because it's not just the parents. Yeah, I go through stuff, but you know what? The frustrations that I feel now are the frustrations that are transmitted, I want to say, through my son. Like his frustrations have now become my frustrations. And now that I understand that that is really the ebb and flow, his frustration becomes my frustration. You know what I mean? I can better advocate for him.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So can you just share with us more about the organization? So you're based, where are you based? You said in the Midwest, but.
Yeah, we're in Detroit, Michigan.
Got it. Okay.
But we do serve the United States. I've facilitated conference in Lagos, Nigeria. So we help whoever needs help. So I don't want anyone to feel that you have to be a person of color in order to receive services from us. But what we do ask is that if you come into our trainings, and we've had this happen, where someone's coming to our trainings, and of course we're not turning anybody away, but if you come into the training and people are talking about their experiences, please don't minimize their experience and say, no, I don't think it's because of racism. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just put your hands like this. Just put your hands like this. Just do this.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, don't do that. Because I think everyone has an experience, and their experience is their experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it is easy for people to kind of conflate, like, oh no, that's because he's autistic, not because of racism, or that's because, and it's like, and it just speaks to, I think, the importance of your work, and the work being led by people of color, for people of color, with people. It's like, it makes a big difference, friends. It makes a big difference when people are doing things in their own community. It's really important. Go ahead.
It's just fascinating to me, like the intersectionality and like how quick people are to like want to kind of deny it and like say, oh, it's this one thing, or it's not this one thing. And like, the truth of the matter is, like, when you really get down to it, like, discrimination is discrimination. Like, oppression is oppression. Like, do you really need, like, to differentiate one reason for, like, from the other? Like,
for other people?
Yeah. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And,
so interesting.
You know, like, what we're up to here is, like, we're creating a world where racism cannot exist. And that includes, like, all the isms, right? So it's, like...
Right.
What is it, like neurodiversity, right? And sexism and ableism and all that stuff, so that like we can actually create a world that works for everybody. And it's not just something that is, you know, like, oh, let's just have like this as an add-on, right? Like, here's what's normal, and like here's this thing that's like an add-on to like kind of like maybe accommodate. Like, no, we have to like redefine how we are just like this idea of normalcy in the first place.
Yeah, we're being asked to turn our sound up. Really quickly, I don't know what we can do to turn our sound up. I just clicked on those things. Is the sound bad for other people as well? Marla, I see your note here. I'm assuming it's okay because we've been talking for 36 minutes, but
Maybe you need to talk louder.
I don't know. Yeah, I know. I have this like allergies in my throat today.
It's allergy season is really a thing. Yeah, I think it's really hard when you I know that I had this conversation with my daughter. It becomes really, really hard when you constantly have to explain to people that your experience is different. Oh, can they hear you or us?
Yeah, we're too quiet. So we're gonna
It's okay.
rally.
Yeah.
They can hear you. That's what's important.
Okay, so yeah, it becomes hard when you constantly have to explain to people that your experience is just different, and people think that you're making it up, and it's and it's not. And unfortunately, over the past, I'd say decade, this past decade, it's become more and more clear that racism is really, really real.
Oh, it's
Unfortunately.
this thing. You've been talking about this thing all this time, and like, oh, it's real. Oh, is it real?
Yeah, and it's like really, it's been happening for a very long time. And even now I'm in a precarious situation and I'm just gonna bring it up. Just for everyone who's out there is a fundraiser that's happening. It's called Color the Spectrum. That has nothing to do with me.
Oh, okay.
And I'm telling you this because it's a fundraiser, and so far they've raised a whole bunch of money. And it has absolutely nothing to do with us. And the Color of Autism is actually a trademark name. And a lot of big stars are on this thing on April 30th. I'm telling you all of this because, of course, none of the money is coming to underserved communities. And that's my biggest, one of the banes of my existence is that we have people that do these fundraisers. And they mean well, right? And they think that if they give to one organization, it's just going to be spread, like I call it the weed and feed. Like for that old man that's obsessed with his grass, he has this thing and he just walks and it just spreads all the feed all over the grass.
Weed and feed.
It's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't. And that's another problem with being a nonprofit, a small nonprofit, especially when you support diverse individuals, because that diversity doesn't trickle down in dollars. And it's like I always have to walk into these meetings where I really have to drive home why it's important to support these underserved, communities, because it just is. I mean, there's so much lacking in communities of color. And I try to stay in my wheelhouse. Like right now, we're actively looking for Latinx facilitators because we don't have that fluency, and we want to make sure that a whole class can be run in a language that everyone can understand, rather than running slides and say, okay, Lisa, interpret that. No, we're going to have someone who, because it holds up everything for everyone. So we just have a class where everyone can, again, see the people and meet the people and make them feel comfortable. That's our goal. So that's really important to us as well. And now I'm ringing. I'm sorry. I forgot to turn this phone off. Oh well, we'll just click that button. And I don't know if anyone has any questions. Maybe the dog wants to.
Yeah, we love. Yeah,
Charlie has all the questions.
She's like, excuse me. Yeah. So first of all, we're dealing with our sound right now, so hopefully it's getting better for you. Sally has a good point. She says my husband uses lots of weed and feed. Doesn't cover all that's necessary either.
So he's gonna have to work on those little brown patches of grass. See, that's the point. The grass that doesn't get the feed is brown. See,
exactly. So, So, there we go. Sounds better.
I turned up the input volume. Mac's been doing that. Okay, hopefully it's better.
All right. Yeah, the sound is fixed. Okay, I was like, I don't feel like we're whispering, but I don't know.
Yeah, we can always talk louder.
So, Camille, is this what you do full time now? Is this your And I'm always so interested in sort of like, what was your journey? And obviously you have a son on the spectrum, and you created this as an answer to a very unmet need that you experienced. But what's it been like?
Like, well, I'm going to be totally transparent. It's been really hard. I spent a good, let's see, I'm on 12 years now. I spent a good 10 years of it being really hard, right? Where I worked, so I have a marketing, I'm a marketing consultant. So I was running all of these different accounts and jobs so I could support the Color of Autism. So the Color of Autism was actually supported by me, because it was really difficult to get money for grants when you didn't have any money. A lot of people don't know that when you apply to these really large foundations, right, you have to have an operating budget.
Yeah.
And they want to see that you have an operating budget of 100,000, 200,000, whatever the case may be, but it's darn sure not 10,000 for the whole year.
Yeah.
Oh, we know.
It was a struggle.
Yeah.
It was also a struggle to have conversations with people about what we do and why it was necessary. And I didn't give up, and I just really, really stayed persistent about it. Always stating a case and meeting the right people. One thing I would say for anyone who's a fledgling nonprofit is really important to be in contact with the right people, with program managers. Like, you could go for, one of my best stories is that there was a foundation, and all the ticks were not there for me. I didn't have the operating budget. I didn't have audited financials, and audited financials, for those who don't know, cost a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah.
You should be
like $20,000, friends.
You should be in the $1 million category getting that.
Yeah.
So for someone like me, why would I spend $20,000 for people to tell me I don't have money?
It's so messed up. It's so messed up.
Yeah. And they increase the threshold, but it still doesn't. Yeah.
Right.
No.
So what I did was this. I would see what grants were out there and available. And I found the program manager for this foundation. And I was like, "Dear Miss blah, 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 I am the executive director from the Color of Autism. This is what we do. Unfortunately, we don't have an operating budget. We filed a 990 for the past 9 years. And this is what we do." And they opened the door for me and said, "We will give you this grant so that you can go out."
Right.
And then from that point on, I realized that I needed to be touching those people, the people that were in the decision-making chairs, the ones who could make that difference for me and make the case to their boards as to why we needed to be funded. And it's at that point, it got a little bit easier for me. But as you know, we, just like everyone else, we have to apply for something and wait to see if we get it.
Yeah.
Like, did we get it? Did we get it? We didn't get it. Why didn't we get it? And so there's a lot of times where we'll read, "Oh, your proposal was nice, but that's not our area." And I'm getting a little tired of hearing that, but not because it's my grant proposal. When we write a grant for, let's say, inclusion within a community or workforce development for individuals on the autism spectrum, don't come back and tell me that's not part of your initiative. I think that every foundation out there should have an agenda for autistics, because autistics need to be supported. It doesn't have to be through the Color of Autism. It could be through whatever advocacy network they have. But you need to put money, you need to set aside so that we can protect these individuals. You know, if you have a social justice grant, then you need to socially write in money for neurodiverse individuals, because they need to be protected.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And those of you who don't know, I don't know that I know the current rates, and I also work in this space, and I'm one in, do you know the numbers right now? One
So
in
they're
5.
crazy numbers. 1 in 54
Yeah.
children, but
Yeah.
is it one? Well, one in actually is 1 in 50, but ironically, 1 in 54 African American child is diagnosed with autism, and 1 in 60 Latinx.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's all kinds of explanations, right? And
Right.
yeah, and the work that you're doing addresses that for sure. You know, getting people, and really a big piece too, of course, is just in general destigmatizing.
Absolutely.
It means, you know, to have a family member with autism, autistic. I see a few notes about autism, autistic. People are messaging us. Here's the deal. You can ask 100 people with autism, 100 autistic people, and my experience has been you can get a different answer. In our work, we've used it interchangeably. I've heard you say that as well, Camille, a few times. So it's a really interesting world to be in general. And so we're using it interchangeably in this conversation. Autistic has autism. Some people will tell you there's a whole explanation that they only ever want to be identified as autistic. And then you have other people, including some of my autistic colleagues, who say has autism is fine. So
The thing is this, I do use it interchangeably,
mhm.
not on purpose. I think it's because, again, when I call it discovering what autistics want. And that's one of the things that I want autistics to understand. You got to be patient with those of us who are not you, kind of like how we Black people have to be patient with the people that are not us.
We're not Black. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, and it's good that you are able to say, well, wait a minute, this is what we like. That's fine. But you have to realize that there is someone out there that I may have to talk to. And I know this is going to sound terrible. It's going to come out all wrong, but that they're not there yet. They're just not there yet.
Yeah.
And I have a ton of parents who just aren't there yet. Some therapists told them first person was the way to go. And so they'll keep saying living with autism. And I just go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. But you do need to be in spaces where you can lead that conversation, right? Because I can say it till I'm blue in the face. But if it's not coming from you,
Right.
person, not like in first person, like literally the realest first person would be you to say what you want, you know, that's the most important thing, in my belief, you know. So yeah, I've said, oh yeah, my son, he has autism, he's autistic. But at the end of the day, autism is not a slur. Autistic is not a slur. And that's the thing that people need to really understand. So for me, it's easy for me, the advocate that's not autistic, to say these things, but I want people to understand that. And I don't think we've gotten there yet. Where people, they say they understand, they don't understand. They don't understand. No.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler.
Yeah.
They don't get it. They just don't get it. And until we get to the point where people will understand it's not a slur.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like it's really like it's just like really relevant, right? Because I think what tends to happen is like we hear it from like one person, right? You hear it from like one person with autism, like what their preference is. We overgeneralize and say that's what it is, when in fact like it can be like you back and forth. People just like you hear things from like one Black person and people are like, that's how Black people think. Like, no, like I am not the mayor of Black people, right? Like we're not the mayors of Black people, but we want that, like, I think like that certainty and like how to like
want to do it right.
Yeah, you want to do it right, like how to interact all the time, and there's no one right way.
No, and I think no, there isn't. And I think also too, when you're trying to be an ally, like when people are trying to be an ally to Black people, they make a lot of missteps. And as I'll just speak for myself. As I fumble through all of this as a ally, I'm leaning heavily on the autistic community to like help me, but I also want them to, I don't want to say, well, I don't want them to take any crap from anybody, that's for sure, because I don't take any crap from anybody. But just remember that sometimes people just don't understand, and sometimes parents just aren't there.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me look at, so we do have some questions, just a moment. I need to find the original question. So someone says, this is an awesome organization. Thank you for supporting the community and keeping it real as well as supportive. Yeah, it's so important and so great. Sue says, I think the idea of getting cops and community members.
It's a question.
Oh, it's a question from Lamsi, sorry. Ade, perhaps. I think the idea of getting cops and community members to know each other is great. At the same time, how do we generalize it across the force justice system, etc.? That is a great question.
Well, you see, I'm gonna have to go back to the fallback. They have to be open to it, right? So it's easy. They meaning law enforcement has to be open. And I would love to have a mandate like this. Apparently my idea was really bright because they're doing something like that here with the Michigan State Police, but not for neurodiverse individuals. It's just for inner city youth. But I do believe that across the board that there should be activities where the community meets community. The law enforcement community meets the community, right? I think that that's really important. And that goes for the entire autistic community, not just for the underserved. I mean, that young man in Utah, he didn't shoot himself, and he wasn't a person of color. I think he got shot like 7 times. But that brings me to something else. Parents have to understand that the police aren't what I call crisis interventionalists. So as a parent, and this is going to sound really mean, I was like, well, who the hell called the police on them? You know, what outcome were you expecting? You know, because they're not crisis interventionalists. And that's really important that we try. And that's another reason why we're here, because we want to teach families how to de-escalate within their home.
Yeah. So important. And it is, you know, and you would think that calling the police, you know, that it would be an okay thing to do. That would be a very different world to live in. We just don't live in that world. We just don't. And, you know, I even just think about the young girl in Ohio. Like, you can't de-escalate a 16-year-old. That, you know, it's like, and de-escalation it's a real skill set, and there are people who have it. And in this country, those aren't the people responding to emergencies. And it's just such a great point. It's like, yeah, a crisis, it's not gonna get better with the introduction of police. Okay. Okay, so let's see. We've got a lot of, Lamsi says, spot on, police are not crisis interventionists. Yeah, absolutely. So Melody says, I started telling people my son is a person with autism because I want them to understand, stop it.
No, Charlie. I
want them to understand that autism is his diagnosis. He also has a personality separate from his diagnosis. I want them to see him as differently abled and capable. And listen, like, as parents, you're all doing the best you can with what you have. Absolutely. And, you know, I was talking about this earlier today. There's a couple of things, you know, there's also, should we call it Autism Awareness Month, or Autism Acceptance Month, or Autism Action Month, or Autism All the Things Month. I don't know. And what it comes down to is that in different parts of the world, in different parts of this country, in different communities, everyone's at a different place, like you said, right? And some of the infighting that happens, is it autistic or a person with autism? Is it Autism Action Month or Autism Acceptance Month? It's like, you want to really keep in mind that framework that we teach here, right? Essential, preferable to me. It's essential that the kid with autism, the autistic kid, however it's going to go, it's essential that that person is accepted and loved by their family. That is essential. And from there, we can build on that. We can have more of a conversation. And I think that's really the work that you're up to, is really, you know, creating, and maybe I'm wrong in saying that, but really creating possibilities for the community and for the families. So yeah, it's really amazing.
That's the goal. That's the goal. And I don't want anyone to feel that I'm dismissive of how they like to be identified, because like I said, I had to learn how to be mindful, right?
Yeah.
But for me, and I can only speak for myself, I also came to the realization is that my son was part of this community.
Yeah.
And how does this community, what are this community's preferences, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I couldn't say what makes me feel good.
Right.
Because it's not about making me feel good. I just knew that if my son was going to be part of a community, he needed to be proud of that community.
Yeah.
And
amazing.
what I've heard more times than not, that being proud of that community was the term autistic, because they were proud to be autistic. And so, like I said, I'm working on me. But I don't like to pretend, like, you know how people pretend like they're so woke that they're asleep. And that's annoying too. That's annoying too.
Oh, there's some quote that reminds me, like maybe something I was reading. It's like you're awake, but like people pretend to be asleep, and then what do you do?
It's that you can wake up people who are sleeping, but you can't wake up people pretending to be asleep. Something
right.
like I believe it's a Navajo proverb.
And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make in general is to not admit that they're flawed.
Yeah.
And I'm flawed. Yeah. But I depend, like I said, I depend on those who with lived experience to put me on my heels sometimes and say, hey, we don't like that. We don't like that because whatever it is, we don't like, you know, I've had people talk to me about therapies like ABA. We don't like that because of blah, blah, blah. And then my counter to that is, okay, then we need to figure out a way for you as a community to design a therapy, be part of the designing. If you can't do it yourselves, be part of designing a therapy that you would think would benefit those who are coming after you. You know what I mean? For those kids like my son and those little babies, what do you think? What was the most helpful thing that you learned throughout your years? And what made you feel secure in who you are? So those are the types of things that I like to talk about, because again, I think that too often people have been driving the imaginary bus, and just trying to pick up passengers, but you don't want your passengers to talk, and it just doesn't work like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great answer, because I see a question about ABA. So it sounds like when it comes to ABA, it could be like more collaboration around that.
Well, yeah, I think that it should be. Because I'm firm on there's some things, because in part what we do, please don't throw tomatoes at the screen, but in part what we do is every day as people, not as neurodiverse people, but as people, is sort of like ABA. We get up every morning. Some of us brush our teeth, take a shower. If you're my son, maybe not at all, but some people do. And that's part because there's a repetitiveness to that. But then on the flip side, there's also that repetitiveness that isn't helpful to that individual. And it just becomes torturous. So there has to be something, there has to be a happy in between. So I do think there needs to be a meeting of the therapeutic minds. And I do believe that the input of autistics would actually make the therapeutic process a lot better.
100%. 100%.
But that's just my non-professional, non-autistic opinion.
Awesome.
It's an opinion that makes sense when it comes to anything, right? It's like we can collaborate, come together, share. And if we can get people who see things differently in conversation, then we each get to see and experience the world as others do. And so that's really important, really amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we are at the top of our hour. Time always goes by so quickly.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of comments. We may have gotten to everything, we may not have. Listen, the biggest takeaway is, what is your website, Camille?
It's thecolorofautism.org.
Okay, got it. Did everyone get that? Colorofautism.org.
Yes. And then our social media is Color of Autism Facebook, Color of Autism Twitter, Color of Autism Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Got to use that trademark.
Right. But most importantly, though, if you or anyone you know is in need of support and services, come to us. We'll do the best that we can to get you what you need, and feel free to be as open as possible. And don't think because you're not a person of color that we're going to shut the door on you, because we're not.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
We've got your website in the comments here. We've got your Facebook in the comments here. And yeah, just really, really amazing work. And if you're someone watching from a community and feel like, oh, we need Color of Autism here, like reach out to Camille, and yeah, I'm sure your community needs it, and be part of that, just as Camille did, you know.
Right.
So she's not looking for a to-do list, but it doesn't hurt to have other people doing the same work and connecting. And if you're familiar, you know, it's really some, it's just really important, amazing work. So thank you so much for doing that. Thank you for being with us.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. We're so happy to have you. Thank you.
Bye.
Loving it.
Yes, take care.
All right, you too.